Please join me in welcoming Kellyanne.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Bridget. Thank you, Heritage, and thank you, Clare, Boothe, Luce Policy Institute. And thank you all for being here. Certainly not just for being here at today's speech, and there'll be a nice lunch afterwards, but just for your interest in the issues that we're going to discuss today overall. I think some days it's really difficult to feel like you wake up and you want to say that you're a conservative woman. I actually think that since the war on women has run its course, and I will discuss that. Come on, Danny. Yes, it has. I'll discuss why. Well, it's run its course if we let it run its course. That things are really looking up to be a person of principle who loves freedom and free markets and individual liberty and choice, frankly, in the most pure sense of the word. I will talk today a little bit about 2013 and what it means or does not mean for 2014 and 2016. And you may feel like you've heard it all. You know, Christie won for this reason and Ken Cuccinelli lost for that reason. But I do want to say to you that the reason I mentioned this an unconventional look is because I take it upon myself to read a lot of what the formulaic conclusions are about a race and the lens through which I think the mainstream media, and unfortunately some in the conservative media, regard some of these outcomes or these predictions before the outcomes. And I'd like to turn some of that on its head with some actual data. So here's what did 2013 have in common? In Virginia, where there was an open governor's seat, in New Jersey, where there was a popular incumbent running for re-election, and in New York City, where after three unprecedented terms, 12 years, of a mayor who had run as a Republican, then was a Democrat, and now is an independent. Billionaires have their way of reminding everybody nobody owns them, and they don't label themselves. What was going to happen with that particular seat? The only thing I can see that all three have in common, frankly, is that the best campaigns won in all three cases. The better campaigns won. Certainly not, particularly when I look at Virginia, certainly not the better candidate, and certainly not the better human being, let me just say. Point of personal privilege. But the better campaigns won. And I do want to put that out there because campaigns do matter. We all believe in, I think particularly across the way in the Republican Party, they look to see who can win. Really, who can win? Voters never ask themselves who can win. They have no idea what electability even means. That's a fiction to them. That's a complete insider's term, electability. Are they electable? People don't ask who can win. People ask who can lead. And leadership to them is defined in many different ways and through many different images and individuals and impressions and issue sets. And in the case why I say the better campaign won in Virginia is, yes, it was definitely a better funded campaign. I understand that. There's a man in California named Tom Steyer who ended up spending $8 million of his own money against Ken Cuccinelli. Started out with the green message, was upset that Cuccinelli had gone after, as Attorney General, had sort of gone after a climate scientist guy at UVA, professor at UVA. But then his pollsters, this Democratic guy, this leftist guy in California, was told by his pollsters, you know, you're going to get this many people based on the environment of this many young people, but you're never going to get a critical mass of people with your messaging on the environment. It's just not as important, as sticky to the voters, my term, as some of these other issues. And so he said, great, what else should we do? And so they took some of the McAuliffe ads and put some juice behind it. Planned Parenthood spent over $1 million and any ounce of ground game they had. So I understand Ken was outspent. But the reason that he lost in Virginia, in my view, is somebody who knows him well and worked for his campaign for a time on retainer and did focus groups of women, probably back in March, did a big report that someday, when I feel like it, we'll probably publish, because there was a roadmap in there that could have been followed a little bit more closely. Run as the education governor. A lot of Republicans don't want to do that. You know why? They'll say, well, we believe that education is local. It's parents and students. Of course, we all believe that. We don't believe in the Department of Education. In fact, we would abolish it if we could. Great, check, check. But I have never, in 26 years of doing this, I have never sat in a focus group with women and talked about public policy issues or political candidates, and I have never not gotten an earful about education. That is on women's mind congenitally, perennially, And there's no voice, there's no ability really to talk about it in a meaningful way by some of our conservative or Republican candidates. And yes, we have charters and we have school choice, and we have people like Governor Christie and Governor Walker in Wisconsin have pushed back head on against the teachers unions and have won those battles. They've both been elected twice, and Scott Walker, let's hope a third time next year. But the point I'm making is that you actually just need to repeat back to people what they say to you is important. You just can't say, but that's not important to me. Well, you've already got your vote. So you need to go find voters who are saying issues that maybe you don't feel comfortable articulating. Look, Ken had I can't think of any more unlucky breaks, so let's just talk about them for a moment. Outspent by about 2.5, 3 to 1. A Republican governor on the sidelines and a Libertarian third-party candidate in the race. Those together created a real imperfect storm for Ken. He should have been able to campaign alongside of and even articulate the continuation of the Bob McDonnell economic legacy in a state like Virginia that has about a 5%, some months less than 5%, I believe, unemployment rate, unlike New Jersey, where we have a 9% unemployment rate, but a popular governor. So he was not able to do that. He couldn't mention Bob McDonnell's name except under oath, when asked. So that really hurt. Having a third-party Libertarian in the race hurt. Do not believe these ridiculous statistics from the left that actually they would have voted for McAuliffe because they produced some poll that said so after the fact. That was never true in anybody's pre-election polling. I've got all the articles. I have our polling, other people's polling. He was always taking votes from Ken Cuccinelli, particularly among young people. And Sarvis did get 5.6% of the vote overall. He had polled as high as 8 or 10%, so you discount it a little at the actual polls. But he got 30% of the 18 to 29-year-old vote, so it did pay off. And that greening, the green vote, the green guy's money helped in that regard as well. He was trying to stop Cuccinelli, but he also helped Sarvis. It was revealed with a couple of days left in the campaign that one of Barack Obama's major bundlers was bankrolling the Libertarian candidate, Sarvis. And, what do we all do? It's like, oh, that's not fair. So what is? Name something that you think is fair in love and war and politics. In other words, you can't just hunker down in the corner and lick your wounds. We have to go find our own wealthy people who believe in something other than who can win and the war on women. We really do, because this guy, got ahead of steam and then got some people on the ground to help out. Ken also, but here's a couple of unforced errors. Ken, who I like very much and I respect greatly, mainly because Ken Cuccinelli was the first person in the United States of America to do what? Sue over Obamacare. Thank you. Did you hear him say that any time before October 17th? No. Yes, I did. Okay, great. Because he was the first guy to sue on it, and because of the government shutdown, according to his chief advisor, because I talked to him, they were not touching the healthcare stuff because of the government shutdown, because it was looked upon that was over Obamacare. To me, Ken never should have lost his larynx on Obamacare, because he could have said to the Commonwealth of Virginia voters, I told you this 4 years ago. I will always protect you. Obamacare will never reach the shores of the Commonwealth of Virginia. I knew it was built on falsities or hopefulness or a pack of lies, and I knew it wouldn't work. That's why I sued. He became a conservative star overnight by suing over Obamacare and really, going on all the major TV shows and explaining in a very methodical, legal, dispassionate way why this was unconstitutional or why it wouldn't work. And I know there are plenty of people out there who say and said, and we have them all on record, so do take note. I don't know why they would ever work in this town again. Obama was reelected and the Supreme Court has spoken, therefore leave Obamacare alone. Let's just see how it works. Why would you see how it works? Thank God you have senators like Mike Lee saying, listen, it's a heck of a lot easier to stop a bad entitlement or a new entitlement from forming and taking hold and getting its tentacles in the ground than uprooting that entitlement later on when it's too late, when it's already taken hold, when there are beneficiaries, when people have a stake in it, when commercial interests are involved. And so Ken pretty much lost his larynx on Obamacare. And by the time he was willing to do it after the government shutdown in a really bold, broad way, he was competing for airspace with Mary Landrieu and Kay Hagan and Democratic senators and Joe Manchin, who were worried about Obamacare. So he really got lost, could have been a clear voice in the silence, got lost in the noise on that a bit. He also was hurt tremendously by the government shutdown. There's no question. Wherever you fall on that issue, one way or the other, 35% of the households, about 38% of the households in Northern Virginia alone, which was always going to be a tough place for him to win the vote, have somebody in the household that either works for the government or somehow relies upon the federal government as a contractor. So there was no question that people weren't getting paid. And they did. In the end, they did get their back pay before the election, many of them, but it was too late in some ways for him. So there were plenty of things going against him. But look, we're losing the message here in terms of what he almost did. He almost got elected governor. He lost by 2.5 points. And then the Washington Post poll the week before the election had McAuliffe up by 12 points overall and had McAuliffe up by 24 points among women. There were other polls. We had one with Hampton University that had +6 with a bipartisan poll with a Democratic pollster, +6 McAuliffe. I saw another poll was +4 McAuliffe, even closer to the actual result. And so it was like +8 or 9 among women, not +24. But which polls do you think the mainstream media wanted to quote? And which poll do you think conservatives ran around and said, oh, we're done in Virginia. We have to give up on Virginia. He's lost it. We're quoting the Washington Post poll, who did nothing but create fits and starts for George Allen and Bob McDonnell and Ken Cuccinelli. We have conservatives quoting their poll as saying it's over, and the war on women has won. Ken lost women by 9 points. That's not great, but he lost them by 9. Mitt Romney lost women by 13 points in Virginia a year earlier. And as governor of Massachusetts, supported Planned Parenthood, is emphatic about his protecting a woman's right to choose forevermore in that famous debate with Ted Kennedy, where he goes on and on about it. And so it's not as clean cut as if you had said this, then don't say that. In fact, let me read something to you. I'm going to read you a quote from October 15th. My disagreements with the Republican Party are long and deep. For example, I'm pro-choice, they are not. I'm for gay marriage. I'm for gay rights and marriage equality, they are not. The Republican Party's not. And then at the end it says, and for you to compare me to the Tea Party is both unbecoming and an insult. That was articulated not by Debbie Wasserman Schultz or Terry McAuliffe, but by the Republican nominee for mayor of New York City, Joe Lhota. He got, how did that work for him? He got 24% of the vote and 19% of the female vote. 19% of the female vote. Thank God he has a wife and a daughter, because he got 19% of the female vote in New York City. So it's not as simple as, hey, Ken should have said that and then he would have won. Every race is different. Then you travel up to New Jersey, and just going to stick with women for a moment. I'm going to focus a little bit on that today, among other things, because we are the CWN. And then you go up to New Jersey, where Christie, who never ran away from his pro-life views, I have stood as close as Bridget is to me right now, watched him explain. I've sat there and him standing here, watched him explain to groups of people how he became pro-life or why he's pro-life. And he says, he's very smart about it. He says, he doesn't say I was once pro-choice. He says, I didn't always hold that position. That's smart, actually. Not my idea, somebody else's idea. He said, I did not always hold that position, but I went to a doctor's visit with my wife when she was pregnant. Mary Pat was pregnant with our second child, and I was blown away by what I saw, and that's probably 15 or 18 years ago. Most of their children are older. And he's like, I was blown. Now, him relating that experience is a very common experience for many people. Even if you're pro-choice, you've said, I've seen the sonogram, and I think I can pretty much tell what that's going to be. And so it's a very transformative medical, scientific, sort of non-political, non-religious awakening for many people, and he articulates this stuff as such. Now, he didn't say things about contraception and divorce years ago the way Cuccinelli had, but they have basically the same position on life. I believe Christie, I actually know he's got exceptions for rape and incest, but the point is they both ran as pro-life gubernatorial candidates. Christie got 57% of the female vote, and in fairness to him, or in fairness to everybody really, women are very pro-incumbent. And so Christie did double digits better among all these core groups from first election to re-election. He did, he improved his margins by double digits. He did much better. But he also did it because he had something to say to them other than that. And what I think Cuccinelli did and did wrong was get in a defensive crouch. If this is your position, you either own it or you explain it. But you don't act like a pregnant teenage girl, like it's going to go away, and 9 months later, it's more of a challenge. And so that's exactly what happened with him and his. I'm glad you like that. That's actually what happened with him and his position. He also missed a tremendous opportunity that I want to see people take leverage in 2014. There is no reason that any pro-life candidate anywhere, male or female, has to be the apologist for being the extreme candidate. I can't think of a more extreme candidate on the issue than Terry McAuliffe. Why do you say that? First of all, he comes into the governorship of Virginia with no mandate and with no majority popularity. He comes in as one of the least popular governors. In fact, on election day and in the pre-election polling going up to election day, Bob McDonald had a higher favorability rating than either Ken Cuccinelli or Terry McAuliffe in nearly every poll I saw. That really tells you something. And so the other thing it tells me is that McAuliffe was vulnerable to charges that you can't trust him, that you don't know him, that you shouldn't hand over the keys to the Commonwealth. Because this guy, who is he? He's a politician. He was the head of the DNC as a Clinton confidant. Now, I would have asked, we wrote about this and tried getting it out there for Ken, but I would have asked Terry McAuliffe very simply, what's your position on, I'm for a woman's right to choose. That's terrific. A lot of people are. But what does it mean to you? Could you explain to us? Because you want to be the governor of the state. What does that mean to you? Do you own or disown the official Democratic Party platform? You were the head of the Democratic National Committee. You raised hundreds of millions of dollars on behalf of the committee and both Clintons. Do you agree with the party position, which is officially no regulations, no restrictions of any kind? So if a state will allow it, sex-selective abortion. Who wants that third daughter anyway? Right? Why didn't somebody ask him, have you explained to your 3 daughters that you're for sex-selective abortions? And if he says, well, I didn't say I was, okay, then are you not? In other words, just ask him. He needs to own or disown that. He needs to sweat it out a little. Non-political, nonpartisan scientists and doctors say that a fetus can feel pain at 20 weeks now. So you've got all these states, probably about 8 or 9, and it's probably the case that'll get to the Supreme Court one day. 8 or 9 states that have, outlawed abortion after 20 weeks just because of fetal pain. How did you feel about that as governor of Virginia? I don't know. Do you know? If anybody here knows the answer, let me know, because I don't know the answer because he was never asked. He should have been asked that. If we're going to wait for the mainstream media to ask him and say it's not fair, it is fair. We had ample opportunity to ask him. We have plenty of conservative journalists. We even had a Republican candidate in the race who could have asked him during a debate. So there's ample opportunity. I'm not a big wound licker. I think we all have to sort of soldier forward and be brave about it. And then ask Terry McAuliffe, you're for taxpayer-funded abortion? I'm for a woman's right to choose, but I don't think I should have to pay for any of your choices. You want to go smoke that cigarette? You want to go eat that food? You want to go have an abortion? Great, but why should I pay for it? These are just logical points of view that many pro-choice women hold. But if you ask them right now to tell you about each of those guys, what you would hear about Ken Cuccinelli was he was too extreme, too anti-woman, anti-contraception, anti-abortion, anti-divorce. I am not sure if his wife and 5 daughters supported him. I have no idea by the time they got done with him. If they even had the Cuccinelli women for him. It was so ridiculous. But all that told, he lost by 2.5 points. So if the war on women was that effective, he really should have lost by the 24 points among women that the Washington Post predicted. So the Washington Post, as I stated publicly, either had a wrong poll, would not be the first time, or all those gains were made up almost completely on Obamacare in the last week. And it's probably a little bit of both. But there's no question that an extra week in the race, Ken could have gotten a little bit closer, if not across the finish line. But that's my whole point. Why'd you wait until mid-October to go full force on an issue that where you really had catapulted into conservative cognoscente nationwide based on that issue? But I think there are some lessons there. Turn the extremist label around. Hang the scarlet A around somebody else's neck. At least have the conversation. At least don't make it so lopsided and go twiddling your thumbs in the corner. In New Jersey, it's a really remarkable victory, re-election victory for Governor Christie, and it didn't happen by accident. I watched him speak in March, I think it was about March, and he laid out his whole plan, and boy, they executed it beautifully to the letter. He said, we're going, as he said in his victory speech, we're going to places not just where we're comfortable, but where we're uncomfortable. We're talking to black pastors. We're going into the inner cities where, I got 3% of the vote last time, basically the margin of error in the polls. And this time he got 21% of the African-American vote. He got a majority of the Hispanic vote. And it's very impressive victory. He was able to go into union households even after, being Mr. Governor anti-union. He was able to, of course, get 57% of the female vote. Really remarkable stuff. I can't emphasize to you how blue of a state New Jersey is either. It is super blue. On the same day that he won, we had 3 ballot initiatives, and he won. I think my vote pushed him over. He won by like 80 points. But we had 3 ballot initiatives, and one passed with 2/3 of the vote, and I'm still trying to wrap my arms around it. The same day they vote for Christie, New Jersey voters voted yes to index the minimum wage to a living wage, which is, wow, really costly to a state that has the second highest tax burden in the country, highest property taxes, and 9% unemployment rate, 15% increase in spending over the last couple of years. So it's not really, the model of fiscal conservative governance, but it's also a difficult state to govern in that regard. Some of it never recovered from Wall Street, never recovered from 9/11. Some of those jobs never came back, frankly, in northern New Jersey for a lot of the professionals. But all that said, it's a remarkable victory. They went and talked to Hispanics and to Asians, and it wasn't all about Hurricane Sandy. I think when people say that, it's incredibly unfair to Governor Christie himself, because that was a year before the election, just like the government shutdown was a year before next year's election, and it won't be an issue. People who try to make it, the only people who make the government shutdown an issue next year are those who don't want to talk about their votes for Obamacare. So don't allow them to make it an issue. That's called changing the subject, and they're always saying, move on, move on, move on. Let's make them move on from the government shutdown. And he had been, a pretty popular governor before Hurricane Sandy. I'm one of these conservatives who does not fault him for 1 second for having the President of the United States in New Jersey after a hurricane. Maybe people don't like the fact that he hugged him. I don't know, I'm a hugger. But they don't like the fact, I would never hug Obama because he wouldn't like it. But, our beefs with people have to be a little bit more substantive than all that, frankly. They just do, plain and simple. You could be upset with him that he take the Medicaid expansion money if you want. If you want, pick on him somehow, but don't be upset that people in his state were dying and drowning, and some of their houses are still not rebuilt. And he decided to avail himself of the presidential visit. Mitt Romney didn't lose the election because of Hurricane Sandy and Chris Christie being there instead of holding his hand. He won one of the 9 swing states, and none of them were New Jersey. So I've already talked about the 2012 elections, so we won't revisit that. In New York City, a guy won who ran. Bill de Blasio won with 74% of the vote. Nobody wins with 74% of the vote. Michael Bloomberg spent tens of millions of dollars 4 years ago and won re-election to a 3rd term by 4 points. He beat Bill Thompson, African-American, former city, don't quote me, comptroller, auditor. He had a state, citywide position that he had been elected to, but he wasn't that well known, but he was known as not being Michael Bloomberg. And he almost beat, he lost by 4 points. This time, Bill de Blasio went for broke. He's gone right after charter schools. He has said that, he's basically going to gut or shut them. He's going to charge them rent in these public school buildings for their co-location. And then he's going to have a moratorium on any new ones starting. And it's just remarkable to me because the charter schools disproportionately service African-American Hispanic students whose Carol Blum is here, whose daughter Maureen Blum is like a national expert on charter schools and school choice. And so I'm sure she can tell you better than me, but as far as I can see, the parents line up for a mile long in a snake-like circuitous line just to get in a lottery, just to have a random chance of getting into one of these schools to save their kids from these own schools. This mayor said that he will, he's done with charter schools. We'll see. I have a lot of friends in New York who say, or I should say acquaintances in New York who say, oh, he didn't mean all that. I'm like, oh, great. In light of Obamacare, I didn't mean that you really could keep it. I meant you could keep it if I thought it was good enough for you to keep. Or somebody said, I wish it had been me, as somebody said, you can keep your health care if I like the plan, not if you like the plan. You can keep your health care if I like the plan. President Obama. But, so they said, he didn't really mean all that. Like, he didn't mean on it either. So either he lied to get votes, or he's actually going to soak the, quote, rich and shut down the charter schools. There are a little bit more than 500,000, so a little bit more than 500,000 millionaires in Manhattan, apparently. Somebody just gave me that statistic and I looked it up. I would never have guessed. I wouldn't have known to say 2 or 2 million. And I think their calculation is those people pay 3, 4, 5% more in taxes rather than move to Westchester County or Bergen County or Connecticut. They'll stay. They don't want to go out there. They'll stay. Maybe they will. I don't know. And I certainly don't think businesses will stay. So every time we talk about, taxing the rich, I think people like Mr. de Blasio have never really run anything. Running a campaign is not running anything. Running your mouth is not running anything. I always say, I like going on TV, but I honestly, I think running a household or running a business is much more rewarding than running your mouth. But and that goes for candidates on campaigns, because in this campaign, he's going right after businesses and may not even realize it. And if I'm Governor Christie, I put a big welcome sign over the bridge in the tunnels, and I say, here are the tax credits. We just reduced the regulation. I'm going to do a couple of executive orders because I've got a Democratic legislature who won't help. And New Jersey's open, come over here. New Jersey's open for business. But I would not look at the election of Bill de Blasio as a mandate for people wanting to, tax the rich everywhere or gut charter schools. Charter schools are on the up and up in terms of public opinion and even mainstream appreciation, understanding of them. More people now know somebody who's in a charter or tried to get in a charter or exercise the school choice option than ever before. It's at a high water mark, and it can only grow. I would really look at it as the better campaign won. And I would look at it as New Yorkers did not win Christine Quinn, who, when you're talking to her, is always looking at her BlackBerry, like always. They didn't want a mayor they can only see her scalp, never her face, and they didn't want Anthony Weiner as their mayor. So they didn't want a lot of things, and there was Bill de Blasio. Bill de Blasio was also either the Quinnipiac poll either captured Bill de Blasio's surge in August and September before anybody else had, or they created it. We'll never really know. And that's what happens with major polls from academic institutions and media outlets, because most of my polls you'll never see. Why do people hire me? Not to tell the world what the data say, but to tell them what the data say and give them strategic insight. But the media polls and the academic polls, they exist to create news, to create public opinion sometimes, not necessarily to reflect it, and not in all cases. But in this particular case, we'll always wonder. A radio talk show host raised that with me for the first time, and I thought about it, and I went back and looked, and he may have a point, actually. He may have a point that maybe they created the surge and didn't actually reflect it. In Colorado, these are the things we don't really hear much about, right? So I think even more fascinating to me than Christie being reelected, although I'm excited and I'm glad he's my governor, and more sort of even more excited than McAuliffe almost losing, because it would be exciting if he had, was that in Colorado, an initiative that would have raised taxes for school spending was defeated with 2/3 of the vote. And that's remarkable, because years ago, if you could just put schools or education or seniors or poor or veterans on something, people would be like, yes, yes. And that doesn't happen anymore. And what happened there is Bill Gates and the aforementioned Michael Bloomberg and others spent over $10 million pushing this ballot initiative in Colorado, which voted for Obama twice and is, purplish/blue these days. And they voted it down. They spent $10 million in favor, a favor of the ballot initiative, and the opponent spent $30,000 against it. And they won with 2/3 of the vote. So there too, who can win? He can win because he's got the deepest pockets. He can win. He has the highest name. You look at things like that, and I look at that, and I have great faith in people. When I see things like that, I have great faith in people that they can figure it out. They can do the math. They know when they're being skewered. They know when they're going to be milked for more money, and they feel like there's already enough money. There was a great article too that showed what some of these other governors are doing who will be on the ballot in 2014, like Governor Kasich in Ohio and Governor Walker in Wisconsin. Governor Walker's giving a speech across town right now, actually, and what they're doing, they've signed sort of stricter laws against having abortion on demand in their states, but they did no signing ceremony, they did no big interviews, frankly, these are my words, not theirs, but I think that they are legitimately for women's health. These measures are for women's health, so get an ultrasound before you have an abortion. I mean, my God forbid, if you had a lesion, they would show you a picture of it, you'd get a second opinion, you'd have all these pictures of your tumor, God forbid, of your lesion. So I think you should see the contents of other things in your body, before you make a medical decision. Why is that like the only exception these days where you're not allowed to look at the picture? That's weird. So seriously, so that's political. And then, of course, even in Virginia, where you had these during the campaign, and I thought more should have been made of this because Terry McAuliffe was against it. It's just a great example of what governors are doing in states. You sign into law regulations on clinics that you have to have a doctor present, or you have to have somebody who can get to a hospital. You have to have someone on staff who can ambulate you to a hospital if, God forbid, something goes wrong within 10 minutes or 15 minutes. In Virginia, you had stricter regulations on tattoo parlors than on abortion clinics. And that was just a great messaging point, really. And suntanning salons, too. And it's like, really? Well, sure. And then you know whose lobby is, the Suntanners Association did not give $1 million to Terry McAuliffe's campaign, but Planned Parenthood did. So we should just call that out and say, listen, this is for women. This is for your health. Oh, to have sterile instruments. There's a novel idea in 2013. I just paid $5 for a semi-good cup of hot chocolate, but we're talking about unsterile instruments? It doesn't fit with the rest of our lives. And so these are very pro-women. I just was giving examples of other Republican governors who frankly are doing close to the same things and yet not, but are known for other things, When I look at 2013 and how it goes into 2014, I can't help but say that, Obamacare is the gift that keeps on giving. That should not be news to anybody. But I think that there are some people coming back into the fold that, yes, if you can focus on that, because really, what is Obamacare but the best example we have of how expensive, expansive, intrusive the federal government can be, and invasive the federal government can be. And so people love reform. If you put reform in any polling question, you get an extra 20 points off the bat. Education reform, healthcare reform, campaign finance reform, reform, it all sounds great, but it's usually for somebody else. We like the idea of reform for things that don't affect us, or that we already have, my kids are already in a good school, or I already have health insurance through my company or through Medicare, so I'm good. I mean reform for everybody else. And that's not what this version of reform ended up being. And that's really the sticky wicket now for the president and his declining numbers of supporters, and his approval rating is 39% now, and that's a true number. His favorability rating will always be higher because he'll always be more popular. He'll always be seen as more popular and more cool than he is seen as competent and credible. I'll take it. He's the president, not the prom king. I think that's a good little delta for us to have. But Obamacare is a problem for him because he says it's his signature domestic achievement. If all is not right with Obamacare, all is not right with the Obama legacy. And the spin now, as of last night, is the president had a press conference. He took responsibility. He manned up. He said, it's my fault, blame me. He's saying that because he thinks he's not on the ballot in 2014. Yes, he is. He was on the ballot in 2010 as well. Republicans do an awful job of running against Obama the person. They do a great job of running against the Obama agenda and the Obama world vision. That's what 2010 was all about. 2014 needs to be 2000 all over again. 2008, voters wanted to make history. They felt really good. A lot of voters who don't do anything notable say, oh, I'm part of history. I made history. I voted for the first African-American man. I got rid of the Bush years. I didn't want McCain would just be more, but whatever it was, that's where they were. They made history. But they're going to repeat history in 2014 because and I think that's why McAuliffe's numbers shrunk a little bit too. It certainly was mainly because of Obamacare, but it was also because people start to get nervous and say, I need a check and balance here. So you've got 67 of the 100 assembly seats in Virginia are held by Republicans. There were no coattails there, and I think that was quite deliberate on the part of voters. Don't want to give a blank check to these folks. Don't want to give them carte blanche to do whatever it is they've promised to do to get there. In the case of Obamacare, I think it's a great example, too, of the real war on women. I'm for a right to choose. I'm for a woman's right to choose to keep her health insurance as she was promised by none lesser than the President of the United States before his reelection. For a woman's right to choose where to send her child and what is taught there. You can go on and on and on with the meme, but in the terms of Obamacare, the reason it's a big problem for the president moving forward is it shreds the credibility and the competence and even the connection he has with the average person. Women particularly, credibility, competence, a little bit of compassion, but also just that connective tissue, what Mitt Romney frankly didn't have. And if he had it, he didn't show it. Let me just put it that way. That connective tissue, that's fraying for President Obama and people who even voted for him, because he's taking something away from them. He's taking something away from them, and he's giving us women something that we just hate, which is uncertainty. Whether you think he lied or didn't, and the latest polls show that people are split on that he purposely deceived or he really didn't know the facts. I don't know which one would make you less or more comfortable. But either way, wherever you come down on that, he's still, people feel like he's taking something away from them, and that trust factor has been frayed. And frankly, it's a big problem with women because women are the chief healthcare officers of their households. Women control 2 out of every 3 healthcare dollars that are spent in this country and in most states are controlled by women. Men would never even go to the doctor unless their wife was like, go to the doctor. And they're in charge of everybody else's health care. They're like number 4 on the list if they have a husband, and 2 kids are number 4 if they have an elderly parent, number 5, dog, number 6, always at the vet, and all these fancy vitamins and braces on dogs now. So women are the chief healthcare, believe me, women are chief healthcare officers of the households. And so when they hear this, when they hear a government shutdown, they're angry at Washington. They may be mad at the Republicans. But when they hear Obamacare is built on deceptions and what was promised is not true, and now people who they know and care about are having their policies canceled, that is sticky. That hits close to home. That's a concern. That means I can't quit the job that I really don't like because I still have my benefits. That means I need to go find another job in a tough market because this just got canceled. So it has a very personal impact on women, not as voters so much as chief healthcare officers. Women are also disproportionately the consumers of healthcare, as I just noted, but we're also disproportionately the providers of healthcare. We are the nurses and the home healthcare aides at much higher levels. We're now 49% of pharmacists, about 33% of doctors, even higher among med students. And so we are healthcare providers as well as consumers. And although Piers Morgan said to me one night with a straight face, nobody on TV is ever under oath. Don't ever forget that when you're watching. Nobody's under oath. It'd be really different if they put like oath in the front of the press secretary or the president, let alone on TV. He's like, every doctor I know loves Obamacare. They can't wait for Obamacare. I'm like, you need to meet more people. What do you mean? Like, I don't even know what that means. I know he knows Dr. Oz, who I'm sure is a lovely person. But, or as Frank Bruni in the New York Times once said, the most joyless eater he's ever experienced. You know, it's like a handful of quinoa here and almond there. He's like, he may be healthy and live to be 100, but it's not going to be fun. But I'm like, you need to meet more people. Like, what do you mean every doctor you know? And it's true. I mean, people really do believe that. But the fact is the doctors don't believe that. We have the medical profession on our side. We're going to have women on our side. And this will start to trickle down. We need, I think, I had said when Christie gets reelected, I hope the very next day after he's done celebrating, he becomes one of the strongest, most singular voices against Obamacare in the country, because he has that heft, he has that credibility, and it'll help people understand without him on the ballot. It'll help people understand through a very credible messenger. So this is the gift that keeps on giving. What I worry about, though, what the left is really good at doing is accusing us of pushing something too hard. So a great example is, you didn't build that. I was tired of hearing it too. You didn't build that. I mean, it was at the convention. You didn't build that. I got it. Check. We're for entrepreneurs. Stop. I mean, we have to be for something else too. But I do worry that somehow they push things like gun control and war on women forevermore. Every single thing that comes out of their mouths is that. But somehow it does cost us public opinion-wise if people start to believe that we've just been saying it too long now. We won't even let it take hold and see if the website got fixed. And folks, this is not about a website. I think everybody here should volunteer to help fix the website, just to show. Get that out of the way, and then show what a substantive anti-freedom boondoggle this is for everyone. Speaking of job creators, and you didn't build that, here's some advice I would give going into 2014 and 2016 of ways not to change our core, but sort of to tweak our message in a way that's more accessible to the voters who seem elusive to some Republican candidates now. Debt, there's no question, debt is a 4-letter word. That is true. Rape is a 4-letter word too, by the way, so don't mention it if you can help yourself. But debt is a 4-letter word. And yes, people are focused on the debt. Yes, they don't like how big it is, and they focus on the deficit. Sometimes they think it's the same thing, just like Iran and Iraq. But more importantly, to the average person, is everyday affordability and long-term financial security. So if you're only talking about taxes, or you're only talking about regulation, you're only talking even about debt or deficit or the cost of Obamacare, we're missing the opportunity to repeat the conversation that's happening everywhere else in this country. The conversation at the proverbial water cooler or the modern equivalent over the cappuccino counter is about everyday affordability, and it's about long-term financial security. Let me push that forward through women for a moment. So the Republican Party talks about job creators. That's great. That's wonderful. They own that space. I think that's useful. But that's about 7.5% of this country are job creators. That's it. Then we talk to job seekers. We say, oh, look at the unemployment rate under this guy. It's awful. He can't create a job. He wouldn't know how to create a job if he could, blah, blah, blah. That's great too, but that's another 7.5% of the country. And even those who have given up or may want to switch jobs, it's like 7.5%, maybe go up to 14% of America. But the vast majority of American households are neither job creators nor job seekers. They are job holders. And our messaging really should go to them. Our messaging should be to let them know, help them do the math, explain to them why, unlike when your grandfather got a job, it was enough to support the whole family. Not anymore. There'd never be enough for the man in the house to have a job. You know, if it is, you're lucky. And so why is that no longer enough? Well, when did that happen? Are we really just pigs in our spending? Do we really just have too many cars and too much bling and too many things and too many, or is it like half of that money, like her salary is going right to the government and right to this and right to that? We need to explain to job holders, A, you're doing a great job. You're doing a heck of a job out there. And, you know, stick with it, because we're going to start disincentivizing people from working very soon. Some are already disincentivized. But if we keep taking from the doers, makers, and givers, we're going to disincentivize people. So that the only reason you'll get up and go to work is because you have pride. And because, you know, you believe it's your responsibility to support your family. So we should be talking to the job holders. Disproportionately, the female heads of households are job holders, not job seekers and not job creators. The other thing is, put a price tag on everything. I mean, here we know women are savvy shoppers and bargain hunters and smart consumers and comparative. We make comparisons before we. It just cracks me up that they're counting people who have the healthcare thing in the cart as savvy. It's just so, you know, we're savvy when we got the things in the cart. Which one do we need? Which one do we want? Etc. Let's tap into that. If we know women are savvy consumers, put a price tag on it. Put a price tag on everything. And not just the trillions of dollars in debt, because that's a little less accessible than if you elect Terry McAuliffe. His stated plan for Medicaid expansion is going to cost this. His stated plan for transportation or taxes is going to cost each household that. Put a price tag on it. You put a price tag on it, somebody's going to say, that's too much. Am I paying for that? What am I getting out of it? I don't think I ever get anything out of that. It never really comes to our area. It never comes to people in my age bracket or my income bracket. Put a price tag on it. We really failed to do that. We just think people will figure out liberal bad, conservative good, conservative frugal, liberal spend. They won't do that on their own. And it's not their job to do it on their own. It's people who want their votes job to do it. And I would put a price tag on pablum as well. So put a price tag on specific policies is one thing, but put a price tag on some of the left's pablum. You know, therefore better schools, and therefore, okay, well, who's not? By the way, when I see that's 96% in the polls, I'm like, who the hell are those other 4%? Like, who's not for the better schools thing? Where are those people? But we know what they mean when they say better schools. They mean more money. And so put a price on the pablum as well as the specific policies, and you'll have a very different conversation with people. The Tea Party is under some attack. There's an article one day that says they're on the rise. I actually wrote an article for a magazine just because they asked me to show that the Tea Party is back on the rise, through data, show that through everybody's data. Then there are articles saying their demise, or on the rise or demise. 1 week they're shutting down the whole federal government and the global economy. The next week they're completely irrelevant and should be marginalized. So the truth is probably somewhere in between. But here too, what turned me off of Loda in New York is he was asked in an interview, New York One, a local station that has the most accurate weather anywhere. He was asked in an interview, aren't you part of the Tea Party, even before the quote I read you in that debate in October. He was asked in September, and he went on and on and on about social issues, which means he doesn't understand the Tea Party. He understands the New York Times version of the Tea Party, or CBS 2 News' version of it. The Tea Party is an acronym, is not an anti-coffee movement. The Tea Party is taxed enough already. And even if he feels like he doesn't agree with them, or he feels like he won't get votes, so he's going to, even if he felt like being part of the Tea Party in New York would get him 18% of the female vote instead of 19% by being against them, he could have just said, the acronym is taxed enough already, and I support that. I don't know a single New Yorker who disagrees with that. But what's happened is the caricature of the Tea Party is that those who couldn't beat them and would never join them decided they would just try to destroy them. And that's the opportunity, really, in that kind of conversation. And so if you get back to the roots of the Tea Party, taxed enough already, and you go back to 2009, the equivalent is 2013, and you realize by this point in 2009, there was no turning back for the Democrats. You had people starting to announce their candidacies for state legislative office, congressional offices, governorships. In fact, why? Because they saw a great opportunity. If the bailouts and the spending and the stimulus at the beginning of the Obama administration were the tip of the iceberg, Obamacare was the tipping point. It was a tipping point after which people said, that's it. This is crazy, 1/6 of the economy, a new entitlement. And they never recovered. And there are men and women across the street sitting in their second terms of Congress. They've been there for 2.5 terms. Excuse me, 1.5 terms. And they, and I don't think people can pick them out of a lineup. You may not know their faces, you may not know their names, but you know how they got there. You know what they ran against. And a lot of those candidates were told, you can't win. A lot of people in the Senate. This whole fiction of electability. So the same year, we're told Romney should be the nominee because he can, quote, win, and did not. We're told Ted Cruz can't win, and did. So all I'm urging you today as we look towards 2016, and I'll wrap in a second, take questions. 2016, avoid the who can win, who can't win nonsense. It is meant to divide Republicans, and it is meant to discourage conservative candidates. You can't win. Why not? Because somebody else just said you can't. Right? You can't win. You can win. And what do Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, and Jimmy Carter all have in common? Besides that, they were all told you can't win. Jimmy Carter was told, you are a joke. You got in there as a peanut farmer, governor of Georgia. You should. And in fairness to him, although I feel no compunction to be fair to him, in fairness to him, he was also a nuclear something or other scientist, but he was known as a peanut farmer who lucked out and became, just count your blessings, stay where you are. He won. Bill Clinton was told, you can't win. You got the women problem. You're governor of the second poorest state in the country. What are you going to run on? He won twice. Barack Obama wasn't just told you can't win. He was told what we're all supposed to believe now, 6 years later. She's got it wrapped up. Some days I don't know if it's 2007 or 2013 when all I hear is, oh, nobody can beat Hillary. She's got it wrapped up. Barack Obama didn't believe that, and he had a heck of a lot less experience than a lot of the folks on the Republican side who might want to run against Hillary, or might not be discouraged from running against Hillary, who I'm not really sure she would win. She's never taken a risk in her life. If you can name one, shout it out. Marrying him was not a risk. That was like a big payday. Big. For all of its warts, that was a big payday for her. But the point is that they're told you can't win, and they politely listen to the naysayers and the critics, and they barrel through and they structure a campaign and they win. We have 20 years of Democratic presidents, if you count these 4 of Obama, these next 4, with them defying you can't win. Somebody says on our side, so-and-so can't win, they're done for. They're done for. The donors all go toward who can win. The mainstream media, who can win. And then you start to get the conservative grassroots too. Well, I don't like him, but I guess he can win. All I can say, and it's unfortunate because the 2 people they say this most about right now I happen to like and think are certainly wonderful people and decent office holders. But when the mainstream media tell you which Republicans can win, run the other way. They know exactly who loses in the end. They knew Romney would be the best foil against Obamacare. They knew in 2010 Obamacare, like Hillary Care in 1994, had cost a Democratic president the House of Representatives. They knew that. Had cost the Congress and a lot of state legislative seats and a bunch of governors too. They knew that. So what did they do? Romney can win, Romney can win. They also knew it was an easy sell for Republicans, those who would never vote Republican. It was an easy sell to us because we always pick the person who lost to the person who won the next time. And so they knew it was an easy sell. They knew it was going to be Romney. He had a going chance. This is not an anti-Romney thing, believe me. I often forget about him. So they know he was next in line. So we already as Republicans say, oh, great, he's next. But they also knew that if you have the inspirational blueprint in the political cover for Obamacare and Romneycare, You've completely neutered the issue. You really, we saw that in Newt Gingrich's case. We saw that there's very little credibility to run against Obamacare if Governor Romney is our, because then, in the first debate, or Obama was asleep that night, but the second debate, he could have said, I'd first like to start by thanking Governor Romney for helping me to craft the Affordable Care Act, because I took a lot of inspiration. Boom, what are the independents going to say then? So who can win and who can't win? Forget about it. Some of the people on the short list for 2016 were told you can't win. Ted Cruz, Rand Paul. Not only were they told you can't win, they did win, thank you, and their opponents in the Republican primaries, not the Democratic opponents, in the Republican primaries had all the king's horses, all the king's men, and all the king's resources, believe me. Ted Cruz will tell you, I'm sure you've seen him say it, he had over $40 million spent against him. In a Republican primary, ladies and gentlemen, he had $40 million spent against him by a sitting lieutenant governor who had deep pockets of his own. A sitting lieutenant governor in a very popular governor, Rick Perry's lieutenant governor, and he won. And when he started out, he was at 3% in the polls. He says it's like less than the margin of error in the whole poll. Like if you applied the margin of error, he didn't exist. And he's a United States senator and obviously a household name. So we just shouldn't go there. We should actually, what we should do in 2016? Go for broke. Nominate a full spectrum conservative that everybody is happy with and see if they can, quote, win. Yeah. See if they can win. If they lose, we could say, wow, we tried that and they lost just like the moderates, Mitt Romney, John McCain, Bob Dole. We're all told they can win. Bob Dole can win, Mitt Romney can win, and John McCain can win. Now we're being told by the mainstream media the reason you guys never win is because you nominate really. I'm told by these donors, we have got to nominate somebody who's more moderate. I'm like, more moderate than who? Mitt Romney? Who was that? Ann Romney? I mean, I don't know who's more moderate than Mitt Romney. Like we tried that, and it doesn't work. The other thing that they all have in common is they suffer from something that I absolutely believe is afflicting the Republican Party the Democrats don't have, and I call it staph infection. I think the only two groups of people you cannot get rid of in our society professionally are tenured teachers and Republican consultants who have failed. It's the truth. And so they'll say, but they always blame the candidate. Oh, Bob Dole, he really did seem too old. John McCain really was nuts. Mitt Romney, way too stiff. It's like, guys, the other thing all three of them had in common is you. And we don't want you the fourth time. I do think looking at 2016, as much as I love Ted Cruz, and I think Rand Paul's a great senator and all that, and Marco Rubio's a good guy. All of that aside, I think the front runners are people who don't work or live in Washington and who have governor in front of their name and who have something to say to broad swaths of the American people. They'll say, I've been a chief executive of this state and here's what I've done. So Scott Walker, goodness, he's transformed the entire pension system there in a way that you, as a Wisconsinite, no longer pay for somebody else's, no longer pay 100% of a stranger's pension, where you're trying to pay, and you're paying 100% of yours and 100% of a stranger's. That doesn't happen anymore. Thank you, Scott Walker. John Kasich has done stuff in Ohio. Bobby Jindal with education reform. And, the list goes on and on. Mike Pence, a client of mine in full disclosure, but in the first less than 100 days on the job this year as governor, 5% across the board tax cut, $1 billion, businesses and individuals. Very pro-life. Do you ever hear that? Cut taxes. You cut somebody's taxes, they're not like, hey, I was wondering. They're just like, oh, the guy who cut my taxes, who expanded charters in Indiana. Terrific. So these governors are going to have a lot to say. Also, I think we have to start thinking more smartly geographically. I personally am very surprised the last couple VP picks, like the last 5 VP picks, had nothing to do with geography whatsoever. I don't think anybody was worried about winning Wyoming and picked Dick Cheney, or Texas for that matter, where he really lived. I don't think anybody was worried about winning Alaska by picking Sarah Palin. Nobody. There was no evidence that Congressman Ryan, who I adore, was going to carry Wisconsin, and they didn't. Jack Kemp was chosen for reasons other than Buffalo, New York, or his home state of California. So I think we really should be smart about geography this time, because if you can walk into November 6th with 18 electoral votes in your pocket, and you can pull most of your money out of that state, it would make a huge difference. Would have made a huge difference this last time. So I think we have to stop what will inspire the base? What will I think the nominee should inspire the base, and stop waiting till August to find a VP nominee to inspire the base, and just go for geography as well, because the Democrats have a huge advantage on the electoral map. Basically, under some configurations, they only need to flip sort of a few more states to have an absolute solid, walking away time. So you're probably going to say, why didn't you talk about Hispanics at all or Asians? Mainly because I've been talking about them for years. I know they're in vogue everywhere now. That is a group that I believe Governor Christie did not improve his margins with Asians, and he tried very hard. He's very up on that. And that caught my eye because I think that we've really squandered tremendous opportunities among a population. You've heard me here at Heritage before. I'm like, listen, you have to ask the household if they identify as Asian. My husband's half Filipino. We're about as Asian as Graceland in my house. So we're not. And but he is. He would never check the box. We never allow any of our kids to check any box. We leave those all empty. But we're not boxes. And anyway, the Asians, intact first marriages, cash-based businesses, their kids go to college, like we drink water and coffee. It's not a matter of if, but which Ivy League school for what postgraduate degree, highest household incomes of any of the 4 major race groups, very religious. Many of them are very religious, evangelical Christian, Catholic. If you go into Catholic churches in some of the suburbs of major cities, if you go into Bergen County, New Jersey, where I live, or Westchester County, New York, or Fairfax County, Virginia, you walk into a Catholic mass any random time, the pews are filled with Asians and Hispanics. The whites are out jogging and having brunch. The ethnic groups they're in there. And so, we don't even try that. We're accused of being the Christian right religious party. I'm like, well, nobody even tried that with them. Why didn't we try? Why didn't we try that? So, we didn't build that when it came to that message. So they're there. And women, of course, are not a monolith. I've written and talked about this extensively. I won't go on and on about it. But I've always been worried about unmarried women, mainly because, except when I was one, mainly because it's a lifestyle choice. So most women today are not single through circumstance. Oh, I just couldn't find Mr. Right. I never got around to it. They are single by choice in many ways. They've decided, I have a nice, happy, prosperous life. I'm joyful. I enjoy my work, my friends, my freedom, and good for them. We should celebrate women being a product of their own choices. And yet, I think the Republican Party is waiting for the young to get old and the single to get married to find new voters. And waiting will be fatal, toxic if not fatal. So if you're an unmarried woman who's 45, and I'm going to end on this and one more thing about women. If you're an unmarried woman who's 45 and you're not married, you don't have children, if you're going to tell me that woman, every woman who fits that description, which is a growing number in this country, only cares about or mainly cares about abortion and contraception, it's foolish. The left knows that she doesn't. They message that way to her because what are they going to say to her? Hey, you should be really happy the debt has increased 40% since we got here. What are they going to say to her? It's okay if you lose your health insurance because you have Band-Aids in your cabinet. I mean, what else are they going to say to America's women but that? Don't confuse it with that being important to her. It may be important to her, but it is not the only thing that drives her vote. If a 45-year-old woman who's not married and doesn't have children hasn't figured out yet how to get pregnant or not to get pregnant, I can't help, okay? But I can help to make us see the folly of believing that that's all she cares about. And ladies, gentlemen, I have to say, I'm going to stand first in line of trying to undo the insults to all women in believing that we only can think from the waist down. I've had it with that. I've had it with that crap, that we don't know how to do the math, we can't figure out the tax burden, the economy, regulations, how to start a business. Ooh, let me ask my husband. It's so silly. And it's not, and we should be celebrating and honoring women, how educated, how intelligent, how savvy. Women went to the polls in Colorado, $30,000 worth of spending, over $10 million, and said, I like education too. Kids are great. I'm not giving you another nickel. And they said that we should respect that and take things like that and go with it. And let me end with this. I should say, because I'm at Heritage too, because I've said this before and it's a great place to say it. I think Medicaid expansion for some of these governors who want to run in 2016 will be a huge issue. Where were you when it came time to take the dollars or not? Because Obamacare will be down here by then, and so that'll be a tough question for some of them. Some will say, I think Governor Christie will say, I got the money for the people in my state. Governor Walker or Pence will say, we set up our own. We said no way to that, and we set up the Healthy Indiana plan or the whatever Wisconsin has. Common Core will be a big dividing factor in the Republican primary, and that may be able to engender some kind of good quality conversation on education. It sounds great that all third graders would read or write, but it doesn't sound great for a one-size-fits-all. I have 2 third graders who are born 5 minutes apart, and I would not teach them the same thing in the same way. That's just one person's kids. To do that for all third graders is foolish, and it's not who we are as individuals who believe in liberty. And I think energy policy. You always have these Republicans running on all of the above energy policy. Oh, that's great. Yeah, coal and wind. Blah, 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 blah. Oh my God. I can't think of anything outside of energy that really speaks to everything that America complains about. We need more jobs. Great, right there. We need to be more dependent in this country. Terrific. We need to stop depending on foreign powers who hate America. Check, check. We need things that are made in the USA. You know what's made in the USA? Natural gas, coal. It's under your feet and off of your shores. And, Anwar was the big issue 10 years ago. Now it's the Keystone Pipeline or fracking, hydraulic fracturing. But any way you slice it, energy is a very positive, affirmative issue. It starts with gas prices, but that's the floor and not the ceiling, or home heating costs. The ceiling is really everything I just mentioned: job creation and U.S. dependence and non-dependence on foreign suppliers and made in the USA resources. Did Heidi Heitkamp in North Dakota, she's a Democratic senator, did she run on the war on women, or did she run on the fact that North Dakota has a 0.5% unemployment rate, and you get a check from the North Dakota government just by virtue of living there because they're able to develop so much of their own energy? And so I think that's, in addition to all the obvious stuff about spending and taxes, these are issues I think will be dividing lines in the Republican primary. Let me end with this because I think it's a great celebration of women today, and it's something we should think about as we think about different women in our own lives, and then how to really message to them as voters and consumers. If you tell me that the ideal target for the conservative movement, the Republican Party, is a 48-year-old woman, I'll say, great, that's wonderful. Now, how do we find her? Who is she? It's going to be me in a few years, unfortunately, but how do we find her? Who is she? Is she the first 48-year-old woman living in an area who is a first-time grandmother? Blue-collar, non-college educated, probably blue-collar, part-time or full-time job, just had her first grandbaby at 48, and so looks at the world through an entirely different prism than she has in 15 years. And you may say, 48 for a grandmother, no way. Yes way. Many places I go in this country, yes way. I see these nubile-looking girls with the double strollers and a belly out to here. I'm like, I know what I was doing the day she was born. How about that? There she is. Her mother's probably 46 and has grandchildren. So the average age, that's the first 48-year-old woman. So that's her basket of concerns. And she's more likely to be ethnic as well. Second 48-year-old woman has a kid in kindergarten and is pregnant with her second. Unheard of 20 years ago, and now the fastest growing mother dynamic is women in their 40s having babies. You were told, oh, you don't have no more eggs. And if a woman had a baby in her 40s years ago, it was called like the change of life baby. And they have like the niece is also your aunt is also that. Remember they have that, right? Come from an Italian household. There was always that. But now they always say, oh, there's no eggs left when you're in your 40s. And like, well, I don't know. I had two rolling in there somewhere. I had two daughters in my 40s, quite by surprise both times. Thank you, God. But the fact is, like, that's a lifestyle choice too. To have or not to have is a lifestyle choice. And so you have, you got this 48-year-old woman with a kid in kindergarten, second one on the way. We all know people like that if you live in an urban area. Third 48-year-old woman. We've talked about her many times today. She's really growing at a clip. No children, not married, 6-figure income, postgraduate degree, goes to Europe 6 times a year, 3 times for pleasure, 3 times for business, is sort of the, she's the smart niece and smart daughter and goddaughter, right? Who helps everybody with their paperwork and their college admissions, and she spoils the heck out of everybody else's kids, and she's very attuned to Medicare and Social Security. She's 20 years away from getting it, but she's very attuned to it because she has elderly relatives, particularly females, who need her help in navigating it all, or just to be a sounding board. The second woman I mentioned, with a kid in kindergarten and the number 2 on the way, has more in common with a 28-year-old who has a kid in the same kindergarten. She sees them 3 times a week. And the lady down the street is having her baby. Whatever her age is, doesn't even matter. It's that you're going to have these kids together in the same neighborhood. And so the left looks at all of them, even the lady who's pregnant, as worried about contraception and abortion. We have to look at them of all the choices they've made and all the natural lifestyle stages that they are undergoing now as they age. And we should respect that, and we should reflect it back to them in our messaging and our policy. And frankly, let's be a little happier about it. I mean, we have people who look like they're sucking on lemons every time they open their mouth. with the exception of 1972, Americans for 52 years, from 1960 to 2012, had always elected the presidential candidate who they saw as more optimistic, not visionary, just more pleasant, just more, you want to be around them. With the exception of 72, when Nixon was reelected, and he was seen as more optimistic than 68, by the way, but by 72 he wasn't. But he had significant advantages: a weak Democratic opponent, war, accomplishments at home. But with the exception of that, we always went. We went for Reagan over Mondale, and who else? Carter. We went for Carter over Ford. We went for Clinton over who he ran against. Thank you, Bush. And we went for Bush and Dole. We went for Obama over Hillary. And so, yes, it's true. We do that. But in 2012, I had a hard time figuring out who that person was, to be honest with you. Everybody seems so sour and dour. People want to listen to people who are pleasant, who they want to be around. Women don't ask themselves just, do I like you? But they ask, are you like me? Are you pleasant, and do we have that connective tissue? That's true in life, and that could be true in politics. Thank you. I'm going to steal this. Thank you. Oh.